welcome to Good Day Farm. Hope you're doing well. Today is the first day of the new year, so Happy New Year 2017. Should be a great year for everybody, I hope. Today I just wanted to do a quick little video about chainsaw chain sharpening. By no means am I an expert, and the information I want to share here is just my personal experience and things that have helped me. So today specifically what I'm going to be working with is the Timberline chainsaw sharpener, jig, guide, whatever you want to call it. I've had one of these for a little while, and for all you purists out there that think everybody should hand file, you might want to just turn off now, because this whole video is going to be talking about using the Timberline. So for me personally, the Timberline jig is actually, I think, a great tool. Some people think it's a little expensive. I think that just depends on how you normally sharpen your chain. So the market that I think this would be ideal for is the person that really struggles with filing their chain by hand, or even with some of the different guides that are out there, the less expensive, more affordable ones, and ends up taking their chain to a shop to have them do it. I know where I live, it can be anywhere from $6 to $10 to have a shop sharpen your chain. So if you look at those numbers, and then the problem with that is a lot of times the shops don't really care about your chain. It's not their chain. They over grind them, they get them too hot, they won't hold an edge, and you might be lucky if you get 6 to 8 sharpenings out of that chain before there's nothing left of it, taking it to the shop. If you learn to do it yourself, you're going to get a lot more life out of the chain. It's going to hold an edge better, etc., etc. So I definitely think anybody who uses a chainsaw more than once a year should learn how to sharpen their own chain. Where I differ from a lot of other people is the methodology, the way you should sharpen it. I am a firm believer in using whatever works best for you. So if a guide or a tool assists you in getting the proper sharpness, the proper angles, the proper settings for doing your chain so that it's consistent and dead on every time, go for it. If you want to just keep doing it by hand and eventually you'll get it, you'll figure it out, I'm sure, go for that. I will make one quick note. In my experience with this sharpening system, it's best to start with a new chain. It's very consistent in cutting every tooth to the same length. And if you have rocked it or really taken a lot off of a tooth, you do not want to adjust it to sharpen that tooth. Just keep sharpening the whole chain and leave that tooth alone, because it's so consistent at keeping everything the same length. I'd rather have one tooth off than end up having to readjust this every time I come to a new tooth. And when I show you how it works, you'll understand what I'm saying. So with that said, let's just get to work here. I'm going to get my saw set up and we'll just go to town. I'll try and explain everything as I go. Hopefully it'll make sense to everyone. Okay, so what I like to do is have a starting point on your chain, obviously. A lot of people recommend you can take a paint marker, Sharpie, color the tooth, whatever, so you know where you're at, so you don't go over and over. With this system, you'll know when you've got back to the beginning, because you can feel how it cuts. It'll be like, oh, that one's already been cut. But if in the beginning, if you're not sure, feel free. Take a paint marker, Sharpie, color a tooth so that you know where you started. So, insert the cutter into the body. I usually start with this. I usually start with the forward one, and I'll explain. Well, I'll tell you right now. Overusing this, I found that it cuts. This one is actually harder for it to cut, if that makes sense, than the other ones. So when I do all my adjustments, if I adjust towards this cutter, then and cuts good, then it'll cut the other one no problem. So set it over the body. You have to be lined up with the right tooth. Anyhow, it obviously goes into that tooth. If I was to try and come to this one, I don't know if you can see there, but obviously the tooth's going the wrong way. So go ahead and insert the cutter all the way and get it on that tooth. Don't worry about the depth, anything like that. Once the body's in place, you see how it'll rock on there? Oops, sorry. That's kind of what you want. And so what you're going to do is, using these adjusters here, you're going to do your best to get this level. And what you're doing here, the point of getting this level, so as you pull the chain through, it doesn't hit the back and get caught on the body, or doesn't hit up in the front and get caught on the body. So you're just setting it level so the chain will flow through it freely. This was probably the biggest learning curve for me personally in getting this jig set up. So now what I like to do before I go any further, pull that back out a little bit so I can rotate the chain to make sure it's going to roll. Free movement. Okay, so the chain rolls, no problem. See how those little teeth come up? Those are what stop the chain from going backwards. So now I can pull them out and I can roll the chain backwards. Ideally, once you get everything set up, you shouldn't need to roll backwards. So now, insert the cutter back in, make sure it's in all the way. Might have to turn it to do that. It is. Then you dial this up just till it's snug, and you'll feel the resistance up against that tooth. And then you want to set this here to hold the chain. It doesn't need to be super tight because then you won't be able to pull your chain through. Pull the cutter out, and then I usually go, you know, about a half a turn on this. So you want the cutter to go back in the tooth after you adjust that backstop, but only like just into it, not all the way in, so that there's something to cut when you start turning it. So it looks like I've got everything kind of set the way I want it. And then this is, it's just real simple. You just turn your knob and push inward as you're turning it, obviously, so that it cuts. Always keep it turning in a clockwise direction, even when you pull it back out. Pull it out. You can pull it all the way out and set it down, and you just pull it out enough so that it clears the chain. Then pull your chain forward, skip that tooth because it's not going to fit in there. Come to the next tooth. If that showed up, you'll see how the little dogs stopped, and then push it back till it catches on them. And then push this in again, and you'll see how it went just about halfway in, and then I have to start turning it to cut some of that tooth away. You want to make sure it goes all the way till it stops on the back side here. You know, you can't see it in the camera, but the handle will come flush through that barrel guide. While you're still pulling it that way, pull it back out again, and repeat. Okay, so now I've ran both sides of the cutters. I didn't do a real-time video of that. I would say it takes, this is a 20-inch bar, full comp, less than 10 minutes easy. So anyhow, I'm trying to see if this will pick it up. Because I run the RS, which is a full chisel, come on, focus here. What we're looking for is a nice point on that tooth, cutter tooth there. I don't know, this camera doesn't want to focus. Anyhow, as you can see, it does a great job of that. They're all filed to a very nice point. The edge going this way where it's filed very straight. If we could get a view of it here, you'd see, I mean, it looks sharp. The one thing I don't like I was talking about earlier, is, so from the back side here, you can see that hook shape. This thing would focus, come on, there we go. That hook shape, so if I was filing by hand, would get a little more of that out and have it a little more rounded, get more of that gullet out. You can really tell from the opposite side, it almost looks like it goes straight up and down. Now it doesn't, because here's the back side of the cutter. There is a little bit of rounded to it. There's not much you can do about that with this design. Does it work? Sure. Will it cut great? Yeah, it'll cut fine. I mean, there's enough of the gullets out of there, it'll cut. But I have found that in my personal experience, if you can remove more of that, it'll cut even better. Now, could you just now come along with a round file and knock some of the gullet out? Sure. That kind of seems like would defeat the purpose, but until you got good enough to actually file by hand with a round file, it might work. Now, what this does not address is the depth gauge, which I talked about earlier. That's this point in front of the tooth. Now, if you run, this is, like I said, an RS chain made by Steel. It's their yellow chain, professional chain. You don't need to be professional to use one of these. It just doesn't have as good as anti-kickback qualities as their green chains. But I would never rely on a chain to prevent kickback anyhow. That's skill of the user. These chains cut faster because of the chisel design on the tooth than the other ones. So, but what every chain needs to be addressed is the height of that. Now, you can determine, do your own research, figure out where you want that set. I like to set mine for all, because I cut all different kinds of wood. So I just set mine at 30 thousandths. So I use this gauge, which is made by Oregon. So this Timberline jig sharpening system does not come with this. All it does is the tooth. You still need to do your depth gauges. You may not need to do them every time you sharpen your chain. As a matter of fact, you probably won't have to. But it's good to have one of these gauges so you check. I like this style here. You just lay it flat over all your teeth like that and let that depth gauge on the chain show up here in the front. You can run your finger over to see if you can feel it, whatever. It's catching on the depth gauge to stop it from going forward. That's fine. What you don't want is it to stick above it. Doesn't appear to be. Doesn't appear to be. So this chain's depth gauges are fine. If you needed to sharpen them or drop them, I'm sorry, you would use a flat file like this. I always just run it right over the gauge and let it hit whatever part of the tooth sticking up. You don't have to push a lot of force down. I'm not trying to cut my gauge up. Some people will remove the gauge, hit it once or twice, and put the gauge back on to check. The only problem with that is you can take too much off too fast. You know, and what that'll cause is a kind of a jumpy or a grabby saw. It'll really yank into the wood, because this is what determines how much of this tooth hits the wood when it actually cuts. Anyhow, so that's my video on the Timberline chainsaw sharpening system. Is it the best way to sharpen a chain? Honestly, no. There are way better ways to sharpen a chain. Is it a good way? Absolutely. Is it a great way? Questionable. I would call it great depending on users. So if you're new to saws or new to sharpening and you're trying to learn what to look for, how to sharpen them, and make sure you get consistency all the time, I really like it. There is a learning curve with this, figuring out how to set it up, and you just need to pay attention to what you're doing on the teeth so you know what to look for. You want that point that I tried to show there. You want this nice straight edge, and you want it to remove as much of that gullet as you can. This makes that all simple. Like I said, when you set it up, you can't, that's not stuff you really adjust. So I like it. I would recommend it to people. It's fairly quick once you learn how to use it, which only takes a couple times. And, you know, for somebody, like I said, that's new or having trouble, you know, using a freehand file or even, you know, a file with just a little guide on it, and they don't feel their chains are getting as sharp as they could be, you know, it'd be worth trying. So anyhow, I'm going to sign off here. This video is running a little longer than I had anticipated, but I wanted to cover, I hope I covered all the points of at least how to use that. There are other things to talk about when you sharpen your chain. Bar maintenance is a big one. I'm going to do a whole separate video on that, on just basic maintenance, and then there's bar, you know, repair and stuff like that, which is going to be way down the road. But maintenance of your bar is very important. It's as important as sharpening the chain, I feel like. So anyhow, hope you have a great day. If you guys have any questions or concerns or suggestions or think I missed something, feel free to comment. Please point it out. This is a learning experience for all of us. Like I said at the beginning, I am no expert. I don't claim to know everything. Have a great day. We'll talk to y'all soon. See you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye now.